The darkness filling my childhood bedroom in Virginia didn't bring peace. Tonight, it felt heavy and suffocating, like a coffin lid sealed shut. I lay motionless, my mind screaming in desperation, but my body was frozen like cold stone. That was the effect of the peace-offering chamomile tea my perfect younger sister Caroline had insisted I drink half an hour ago. My lungs were taking shallow, barely there breaths, but ironically, my hearing was brutally sharp on the edge of life and death. The clicking of her high heels on the oak floor was steady, cold, and impatient. The door groaned open, and a tall male shadow blocked out the dim light from the hallway. He knelt down, pressing two rough fingers against the pulse in my neck, a move that felt terrifyingly professional. From the shadows, Caroline's voice rang out dry and emotionless. "Make it look natural. Dad wants everything done before the court hearing." In that moment, I realized blood ties meant nothing compared to the dark ambition of this family. My name is Audrey. I am 36 years old. In my family's eyes, I am a rough draft, a boring daughter who doesn't know how to enjoy life or please others. But the outside world knows me by a different title: Senior Data Analyst for a top strategy consulting firm in Virginia. My life is built on algorithms, SQL code, and statistical probability. I own a high-end apartment overlooking the Potomac River, drive a late-model German car, and have a 401k that grows steadily at 7% a year. No one in my family in Pennsylvania knows about any of this. I learned a bitter lesson at age 12. Sharing success with them only results in cold silence, or worse, cruel comparisons to Caroline. Order and logic are the shields that protect me from the chaos of emotion. Until 1 week before that fateful night. I was sitting in my office, bathed in the blue light of 3 monitors, when a white envelope with the IRS logo was placed on my desk. The content inside was like a crack in a frozen lake. The IRS was asking me to explain $85,000 in unreported income from the previous fiscal year. $85,000. For someone obsessed with accuracy down to the penny like me, this number was an insult. I had never seen that money, never earned it, and certainly never spent it. As a data person, my first reaction wasn't fear, but analytical suspicion. A data entry error? Identity theft? I put the letter in my briefcase, planning to trace this money trail right after fulfilling my obligations back home. A fatal mistake. I underestimated human malice when compared to the coldness of numbers. My mother had just undergone knee replacement surgery. My father, Victor, a typical patriarchal man who viewed caregiving as menial women's work, certainly wasn't going to lift a finger. And Caroline? My precious sister hadn't lifted a finger for anyone but herself in her entire 32 years of life. So, I took 2 weeks of leave and drove 5 hours back to my childhood home in the Uckus suburbs of Pennsylvania. When I pulled into the driveway, the house loomed large and gloomy. The air here always smelled of judgment. Victor was sitting in his old leather armchair watching financial news with a permanent scowl. He glanced at me, a gaze that slid over me indifferently as if I were an invisible piece of furniture that had just been moved back into place. Not a word asking about the long drive, not a thank you for coming home. "Where's Caroline, Dad?" I asked, setting my bag on the cold wooden floor. Victor didn't even take his eyes off the TV screen, his voice deep and muddy. "She's busy. She's a social butterfly, lots of important connections. Unlike you, always sullen, hiding in a corner." That sentence was the perfect summary of my position in this so-called family. To him, my quiet nature, caution, and financial independence were weaknesses. Caroline's noise, hollow glamour, and habit of spending money like trash were signs of success. My mother sat in a wheelchair in the corner of the dining room, her eyes glued to her plate, her hands wringing together anxiously. She dared not look me in the eye. Maybe it was guilt. or maybe fear ingrained in her marrow after 40 years of living under Victor's tyrannical shadow. I had spent my entire childhood trying to find a little warmth from her, but she was too busy pleasing Caroline and soothing Dad's unreasonable temper tantrums. The only person who ever really saw me was Grandma Eleanor. She passed away 15 years ago, leaving a massive void in my soul. But before she died, she secretly gave me an old tin box, the kind that holds Danish butter cookies with peeling paint, with a strange instruction that I was only now beginning to understand the weight of. Audrey, you are the smartest person in this house. Don't open this in front of your father. When you are truly alone, with no one left to lean on, open it. I had kept that box in the deepest corner of my closet in Virginia for 15 years without opening it. I thought it was just sentimental keepsakes from an old woman. Another mistake of mine, ignoring a significant variable in historical data. The next few days went exactly according to my probability predictions. I cooked, cleaned, helped Mom to the bathroom, changed her bandages, and managed her medication schedule down to the hour. Caroline appeared exactly twice in 4 days, both times looking gorgeous with the latest iPhone in hand. She posed next to Mom's wheelchair, stroked her hair, took a few selfies, and posted them to Instagram with a sappy caption. Taking care of Mommy. Nothing is more important than family, chick family first, chas love Mom. She stayed exactly 20 minutes each time before rushing off to an important appointment. I stood in the kitchen, hands covered in soap suds, watching the notification Caroline posted a new photo pop up on my phone, and felt a cold disgust run down my spine. Not because of the fakeness, I was used to that script. What made me shudder was the look in my dad's eyes when he looked at Caroline. He looked at her with unconcealed pride, a rare smile on his lips, while I, who was diligently cleaning up the whole family's mess, was completely invisible. I had been too complacent. I had mentioned the IRS letter to Mom on the afternoon of the 5th day, just a casual remark while changing her bandage. Mom, I got a weird notice from taxes. They said I had $85,000 in outside income. I probably need to check into it. Someone might be stealing my identity. I didn't notice Mom's hand trembling so hard she dropped the medicine bottle. I didn't analyze the data from the sheer panic in her eyes as she glanced quickly toward Dad's office door. My professional sharpness had been dulled by foolish family sentiment. And that is why that evening Caroline, with a rare sweet smile, personally brought that cup of chamomile tea to my room. Drink this, sis, you've been working too hard. Caroline's voice was unusually soft, but her eyes, lined with sharp eyeliner, held no warmth. She placed the steaming cup of tea in my hand. Steam rose, carrying the strong scent of chamomile, promising a deep, dreamless sleep. I was exhausted after 96 straight hours of playing the unpaid, devoted nurse. Exhaustion had dulled my survival instincts. I took the cup and drank the warm liquid like a fool taking poison voluntarily. 30 minutes later, my system crashed. It didn't feel like sleepiness. As a data analyst, I know how to distinguish between physiological fatigue and external interference. It started at my fingertips, a numbness spreading fast like malware infiltrating a server. My legs lost sensation, then my arms, and finally, my tongue. I fell onto the bed, not because I wanted to lie down, but because gravity had defeated my useless muscles. I lay there, eyes staring blankly at the stained ceiling. My body became a tomb, burying my own soul alive. I wanted to scream, wanted to jump up, but the command from my brain was blocked at the spinal cord. I was locked in a temporary state of locked-in syndrome. But my hearing, the last sense to surrender to death, was still operating at 100% capacity. The bedroom door groaned open again. This time, it wasn't just the sound of Caroline's sharp heels. There were heavy footsteps, rubber soles, the cautious walk of a man. "Do it fast," Caroline whispered, her voice lacking any of the sweetness from before, replaced by a cold irritability. Dad says the drugs only work for 4 hours. The man didn't answer immediately. He approached my bed. I felt his weight depress the mattress. He pulled my eyelid up, shining a small flashlight beam into my pupil. The light was blinding, but I couldn't squint or look away. Pupils dilated. Zero reflex. His voice was deep, professional, not the voice of a street thug. How big a dose did you give her? Exactly what you said. 1 packet, Caroline replied, her voice trembling slightly. 1 packet? The man hissed softly. Caroline, that's a dose for a 200-pound man. She's only about 120 pounds. Her heart rate is dropping below 50. If she dies, our deal is off. I'm a private investigator, not a hitman. Private investigator? My analytical brain immediately processed this new data. Why did Caroline and Dad hire a PI? And why was he here, checking my vitals after I was drugged? She won't die, she's tough as nails, Caroline said dismissively, pacing the room, her heels clicking on the floor like a hammer driving nails. Just do your job. Take the pictures. Get her fingerprints on these transfer papers. Dad needs proof she's incapacitated and spending recklessly for the court hearing on Friday. Friday's court hearing. The information hit my mind harder than any physical punch. So this was the plan. Not murder in the literal sense, but killing my legal identity. I don't like this, the PI muttered, the camera shutter clicking. He was staging the scene, maybe placing an empty liquor bottle next to me, or scattering fake debt papers on the bed. Her record is squeaky clean. Credit score 820, no criminal record. Proving she's mentally unstable to get guardianship is too risky. That's my lawyer's job, Caroline cut in, her voice hardening, sounding exactly like Victor's condescending tone. Your job is to create proof of a mental breakdown. Dad says she's been secretly stealing from their retirement fund for years. She has bipolar disorder, delusional that she's rich when she's actually drowning in debt. We're doing this to save her from herself. I wanted to laugh, a wild, bitter laugh, but my mouth was frozen. Bipolar disorder? Debt? I manage multi-million-dollar investment portfolios for corporate clients. I haven't missed a credit card payment in 15 years. But the truth doesn't matter as much as the story told in court, and Victor, with Caroline's help, was writing a horror story where I was the crazy villain. Guardianship. That was the terrifying keyword. If they succeeded next Friday, I would lose everything. Not just money. I would lose the right to decide where I live, who I see, even ownership of my own body. I would become a child in an adult's body, under the absolute control of a cruel father and a greedy sister. They would drain my accounts, sell my apartment, and lock me in some cheap nursing home under the guise of care. Done, the detective said, standing up. His breathing was heavy. It seemed his professional conscience, if he had one, was wrestling with the fee. Her heart rate is still low. Watch her closely. If she stops breathing, call 911 immediately. I don't want a murder charge. Fine, go. Don't let anyone see you leave. Caroline shooed him away. Footsteps leaving. The door closed. I was left alone in the dark, with a heart beating slowly, weakly, but full of rage in my chest. I'm not dead. I won't die. They made a fundamental error in data assessment. They thought I was weak because I was always silent. But they forgot that silence is the best state for observation. The drug was sinking deeper, pulling my consciousness into a black void. But before sinking completely, I engraved a command into my memory, like an undeletable if-then line of code. If I wake up, they will pay for every second of this. Not with violence, but with the very thing they are trying to use to destroy me. The truth and the law. Time in the darkness didn't pass according to normal physics. It expanded and contracted with the faint beat of the pulse in my wrist. If the detective was right, I had 4 hours. 4 hours for my biological system to reboot itself after a forced shutdown. When the paralysis began to recede, it didn't bring relief. It brought pain. First came the fingers. An invisible storm of fire ants started running from my fingertips up my arm, tingling and stinging. It was the signal of nerves reconnecting to the brain. I welcomed that pain. In the world of data, pain is feedback. It confirms the system is still online. I bit my lip hard to keep from groaning, focusing my entire will on moving my index finger, then my middle finger. 1, 2. 1, 2. A basic function test. By the time I could turn my neck slightly, the room was dimly lit. Yellow streetlights filtered through the curtains, illuminating a small white rectangular object on the wooden floor. It lay right next to the foot of the bed, where the detective had knelt earlier. Using every ounce of strength, I rolled to the edge of the bed. My arm felt as heavy as lead, but I managed to dangle it down, trembling fingers fumbling on the cold floor. I touched it. A business card. I brought it close to my eyes, squinting to read in the dim light. Marcus Webb, private investigator. With a handwritten phone number on the back. Why did he drop it? A stupid amateur mistake? Or a calculated variable? I recalled his tone, the hesitation, the worry about the dosage, the phrase, "I don't want a murder charge." He was a weak link. And in any security system, the weakest link is the key to breaking the firewall. I hid the card inside my bra, the safest place right now. Suddenly, the sound of tires crunching on gravel echoed from the front yard. My whole body stiffened. Not from the drugs, but from survival reflex. That was the sound of Victor's Lincoln. Dad was home, or he had gotten up early to go somewhere and just returned. The front door slammed shut, lightly shaking the picture frame on the wall. Heavy, authoritative footsteps sounded downstairs, then moved toward the stairs. I shut my eyes tight, adjusting my breathing to the shallow, steady rhythm of deep sleep. Playing dead, the most primal prey tactic against a predator. She hasn't woken up yet, has she? Victor's voice boomed from the hallway, deep and cold. Still sleeping like the dead, Caroline's voice replied, sounding sleepy but still submissive. I checked at 3 a.m. Webb's stuff is really good. Good, Victor grunted. The hearing is at 9 a.m. Friday. Between now and then, you have to ensure she doesn't fully wake up. Give her half a dose every 6 hours. Don't let her die, but don't let her be able to talk either. But Dad, Caroline hesitated. The lawyer said it's better if we get her to sign a voluntary power of attorney first. She'll never sign. Victor cut her off, his voice filled with supreme contempt. Don't you understand your sister? She's stubborn and calculating. The only way is to convince the court she's lost her mind. I've already filed the fake medical records. History of depression, paranoia, and self-harm tendencies. Everyone will believe it. A 36-year-old woman, no husband, no kids, living alone in the big city. Who wouldn't think she has mental issues? Every word was like a surgical scalpel slicing into my mind, severing the last fragile thread of affection remaining. It wasn't that he hated me. Worse, he viewed me as a damaged asset that needed to be liquidated to recover capital. His cruelty wasn't personal. It was economic. And that made it 1,000 times more terrifying. Footsteps moved away toward the master bedroom. The door closed. Silence enveloped the house, but now it carried a deadly weight. I opened my eyes, staring at the ceiling. Friday. Today was early Tuesday morning. I had less than 72 hours before I was stripped of my rights as a legal human being. Rage flared up, burning away the last of the sedative in my blood. I couldn't lie here and wait to die. I had to move. Now. I forced myself to sit up. My head spun like I was on a ship in a storm. My feet touched the floor, soft as noodles. I held onto the bed frame, taking 3 deep breaths. Input, Willpower, process, override biological limits, output, movement. I dragged myself step by step to the closet, grabbing my trench coat and purse. Car keys. Thank God I never had the habit of leaving keys lying around. They were tucked in the side pocket of my purse. I didn't dare change clothes, still wearing the thin silk pajamas with the trench coat over them. The hallway was pitch black. I crept past Caroline's room. Her light snoring drifted out, the sound of an empty conscience. I passed my parents' room. A sliver of light escaped from under the door. Victor was still awake, probably double-checking the forged documents. Every step on the old wooden floor was a gamble. Creak. A small noise sounded under my foot. My heart stopped a beat. I stood rooted, holding my breath, listening. No movement from Dad's room. Maybe the wind howling outside covered it. I kept moving, stairs, living room, and finally, the front door. My hands shook as I touched the latch. Click. The sound of the latch opening sounded like a gunshot in the quiet night. I pushed the door, the cold Pennsylvania air rushing in, slapping my face, making me more awake than ever. I didn't dare close the door, afraid of the noise. I left it slightly ajar, running, barefoot on the dew-wet grass to the parking spot. I slid into the driver's seat, locking the doors immediately. The feeling of safety from the metal shell wrapped around me. I didn't start the engine yet. The noise would wake the whole house. I released the handbrake, letting the car roll freely down the gentle slope of the driveway out the gate. 10 meters, 20 meters, 50 meters. Only when the house was a dark blob in the rearview mirror did I turn the key. The engine roared to life. I stepped on the gas, plunging into the night, leaving behind the house from hell and the blood relatives conspiring to bury me alive. The escape was successful, but the war had just begun. I drove aimlessly for 30 minutes, keeping a steady speed of 55 mph so as not to attract any patrol cars. My destination was a 24/7 truck stop off the highway, where the flashing neon open sign was the only lighthouse in the pitch-black Pennsylvania night. I parked in the darkest corner, cut the engine but locked the doors tight. My hands, now shaking less, pulled the business card from my bra. Marcus Webb. In the world of data analytics, information is the most valuable currency, and right now, this man held the encryption key to the entire chaotic dataset of my life. I grabbed my phone, dialed the number. It rang 3 long times before a hoarse, guarded voice answered. Webb here, who's calling at this hour? It's me, the woman you left to die with a heart rate under 50, I said, my voice ice cold and articulate. Silence on the other end for 3 seconds. I could hear the click of a lighter and a deep inhale. You're awake? Earlier than I calculated, and you're calling me means you got out? Don't ask redundant questions. I cut him off, activating the call recording mode on my phone. You have 2 choices, Mr. Webb. 1. I send the recording of your voice in my bedroom to the police, and you lose your license and go to jail for breaking and entering and conspiracy to commit murder. 2. You tell me exactly what you know. Right now. A long sigh echoed through the speaker. Listen, Audrey, I didn't intend to kill you. That's why I purposely spoke loudly about the dosage so you'd hear if you were conscious. And the card. I accidentally dropped it. I don't need excuses. I need data. Why did my father hire you? Victor hired me 3 weeks ago, Marcus began, his tone shifting to professional reporting mode. The initial request was simple. Find evidence proving Audrey Martinez is mentally unstable, spending recklessly, and incapable of managing finances. He wanted a clean file to file for emergency guardianship. And what did you find? Nothing, Marcus admitted, a hint of respect in his voice. You're a PI's nightmare. Your record is too clean. You live disciplined like a machine. No bad debt, No gambling, no drinking. Your net worth is bigger than both your parents combined. So why did you continue? Because when I reported back no evidence, your dad went nuts. He didn't want the truth. He wanted a result. He tripled my fee and handed me another file. He said you stole $200,000 from the family over the past 5 years. He showed me bank statements with your signature on the withdrawals. I gripped the phone tight. I never signed those papers. I know, Marcus said quickly. I've done this for 20 years. I know the smell of fraud when I catch a whiff. I secretly ran an independent forensic audit on those accounts. The signatures are forged, though pretty sophisticated. But more interesting is the money flow. Money didn't flow into your pockets. Where did it go? It flowed back into secret investment accounts under the name Victor Martinez. And worse, those investments all tanked. Your dad got involved in a crypto scam ring and some ghost real estate projects. He burned through his savings, your mom's money, and now he's desperate for new funds to plug the hole. A horrific panoramic picture formed in my head, pieces falling into place with brutal precision. Victor didn't hate me because I was incompetent. He hated me because I was the only gold mine he hadn't tapped yet. The guardianship suit wasn't about family honor. It was a legal robbery. He needed control of my assets to pay for his own stupidity. And the $85,000 income the IRS asked me about? I asked, my voice almost a whisper. That was an unsecured loan he took out in your name last year, using your social security number. He stole your identity a long time ago, Audrey. The IRS thing is just the first crack in the dam. If you aren't declared incapacitated by next Friday, and if you start investigating, he's going to prison for a long time. That's why he needs you to disappear, legally. And Caroline? Your sister? Marcus scoffed. She's a pawn. Victor poisoned her mind that you're a thief, that you're destroying the family. Caroline believes it hook, line, and sinker. She thinks drugging you is a humanitarian intervention to save the family. She's stupid and craves your dad's approval so much she's willing to commit a crime without even knowing it. I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the cold car window. This truth hurt more than the estrangement. My father was a pathetic fraudster. My sister was a dangerous idiot. And my mother? Where was she in this equation? You still there? Marcus asked. I'm here. I opened my eyes, the fleeting weakness extinguished, replaced by cold calculation. You said you accidentally dropped the card, meaning you don't want to see me harmed. You want to switch sides, right? I'm a mercenary, Audrey, but I have principles. I don't work for guys who kill their kids, and more importantly, I know Victor is going bankrupt. He won't have the money to pay me. But you seem like someone who pays on time. You're smart, I said. I need you to testify. But first, I need physical evidence that my father cannot deny. Something buried 15 years ago. What are you talking about? My grandmother's original will. It's in my apartment in Virginia. Meet me there at noon. Don't be late. I hung up, not waiting for an answer. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Pale face, dark circles under eyes, but burning with a dark fire. Audrey, the obedient, submissive daughter, died in that bedroom last night. The person sitting here was Audrey, risk analyst. And I just identified the biggest security breach in Victor's system. It was time to run my own data purge. 12 noon. I stood in front of my apartment door in Virginia. My hands still trembled slightly, putting the key in the lock, not from fear, but from hunger and exhaustion after 5 hours of non-stop driving. When the door opened, the familiar scent of sandalwood candles and orderly neatness rushed out to hug me. This was my fortress, the only place in the world that followed the logical rules I established. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Marcus Webb stood there, looking more ragged than when we spoke on the phone. He wore a fraying leather jacket, dark circles hidden behind cheap sunglasses. He looked at me, not with the eyes of a predator, but with the assessment of a reluctant ally. "You look worse than I thought," he commented rudely, stepping inside without waiting for an invite. "But at least you're standing. Most people would be flat on their back for 3 days after that dose." "I don't have 3 days," I replied coldly, closing the door and bolting the safety lock. "I have 60 hours before my father turns me into a mental patient in court." I led him to the living room, then went straight to the bedroom, throwing open the closet door. In the far back corner, behind a stack of old shoeboxes, the round Danish butter cookie tin sat there, covered in a thin layer of dust. I brought it to the kitchen table. Marcus sat opposite, arms crossed, waiting with a skeptical look. "This is your secret weapon?" He raised an eyebrow. "A box of cookies?" I didn't answer. I opened the lid. Inside were just old black and white photos, some spools of colored thread, and loose buttons. A collection of junk to anyone else's eyes. Marcus sighed, heavily disappointed. "Great. We're going to court and throwing buttons at the judge?" "Shut up and watch," I ordered. Memories flooded back as vivid as 4K footage. Grandma Eleanor, with her thin hands covered in age spots, teaching me to look deeper than the surface. "Everything valuable needs protection, Audrey, and the safest place is the most ordinary place." I dumped everything out onto the table. Then I flipped the box over, using my thumbnail to press hard on 3 tiny convex points on the bottom rim. A manual locking mechanism she had a jeweler custom make in the 80s. Click. A small pop sounded. The bottom of the box separated, revealing a paper-thin secret compartment underneath. Marcus leaned forward, eyes wide. "What the hell?" Nestled in, the secret compartment lay a yellowed envelope and a small leather-bound notebook. I picked up the envelope with trembling hands. The red wax seal had been broken 15 years ago, but the contents were intact. It was the last will and testament of Eleanor Martinez. I scanned the typed lines, my brain automatically searching for keywords. And then, I found it in Article 4. "I leave full ownership of the property at 108 Maple Drive, Pennsylvania, including the house and land, to my only granddaughter, Audrey Martinez. My son, Victor Martinez, has no rights to this property due to ethical violations I do not wish to name." The world around me seemed to collapse and reconstruct itself in a split second. "The house." My voice cracked, hoarse. "That house is mine." I had lived in that house my entire childhood, feeling like a freeloader. My father, Victor, always reminded me how hard he worked to keep a roof over our heads. He made me be grateful for every meal, every sleep. When I turned 18, he made me pay rent in my own home. But the truth was, he had been living in my house. He had hidden this will. He had filed a false statement to the court 15 years ago, claiming Grandma died intestate, without a will, so he would inherit by law as the only son. Marcus snatched the paper from my hand, reading voraciously. "Damn, this is probate fraud. But Audrey, this was 15 years ago. The statute of limitations for fraud is usually 5 or 7 years. We might have legal trouble." "No," I said, flipping through the small accompanying notebook. It was Grandma's expense diary, but the last page was a list of bank accounts she left for me, accounts I never knew existed. Victor didn't just cheat once. He used this house as collateral for bank loans in 2010, 2015, and most recently, last year. I looked straight into Marcus's eyes, the weakness completely gone, replaced by the ruthless coldness of a judge about to pass a death sentence. Every time he signed a loan document using stolen property, he committed a new crime. Every tax return he filed in the last 15 years without declaring the true inheritance is a federal offense. This is a continuing offense. Marcus smirked, a vicious smile of approval. You really are a devil, Audrey. You just turned an expired civil case into a federal criminal case with a life sentence. He stole 15 years of my life, I said, packing the documents into a waterproof file folder. He made me believe I was a burden. He made my mother so scared she went mute. He turned my sister into a spoiled doll. I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. The screen lit up, reflecting my emotionless face. Now, we aren't just defending in court on Friday. We attack. I want you to go back to Pennsylvania tonight, Marcus. To do what? My dad is paranoid, but he's tech illiterate. He has security cameras in the house, right? Yeah, an old CCTV system, saves to a local hard drive. I need that hard drive, ordered. It has the footage of Caroline entering my room, him and you talking, and most importantly, him thinking no one was watching. Bring it here. We're going to edit the best movie for the trial. Marcus stood up, adjusting his collar. You know, stealing is also illegal. It's my house. I slammed the will onto the table. You're just helping the landlord recover personal property. Marcus laughed out loud, the sound echoing in the empty apartment. All right, boss. I like how you work. As he left, I sat down, staring at Grandma's shaky signature on the yellowed paper. She gave me the tool. Now it was time I used it to level everything. Friday, 8:55 a.m., Chester County Courthouse. The air in courtroom 4 smelled of old wood polish and compressed desperation. I walked in with my lawyer, Mrs. Sarah Jenkins, a woman with eyes sharp as razors whom Marcus had recommended. I wore a navy blue suit, hair in a neat high bun, face free of makeup but radiating absolute alertness. At the plaintiff's table, my family was present in full force. Victor sat there, shoulders slumped, head bowed, playing the perfect role of a heartbroken father forced to make the hardest decision of his life. Mom sat in the row behind, twisting a handkerchief, eyes red. Caroline sat next to Dad, wearing a meek pastel dress, occasionally patting Victor's back. If I were an outsider, I would believe this tableau of a loving family trying to save a wayward child. Judge Patterson entered. She was a woman in her 60s, stern and not looking like someone who enjoyed jokes. The hearing began. My father's lawyer, Mr. Sterling, stood up. He had a warm, trustworthy voice, the kind designed to sell insurance or lull a jury to sleep. Your Honor, Sterling opened, voice heavy with sorrow. My client, Mr. Victor Martinez, is heartbroken to be here today. His daughter, Miss Audrey, has struggled with bipolar disorder and paranoia for years. Recently, her condition has deteriorated severely. She has neglected her work, spent lavishly on virtual investments, and most painfully, started stealing money from her own parents to satisfy her shopping addiction. Sterling placed a thick file on the judge's bench. Here are medical records from the family doctor confirming psychological instability symptoms. And here, he held up another stack of papers. Are bank statements showing a series of unusual cash withdrawals from Mr. and Mrs. Martinez's accounts, executed by Miss Audrey. The total amount is $200,000. We ask the court to grant emergency guardianship to Mr. Victor to protect Miss Audrey from financial self-destruction. Judge Patterson flipped through the file. She frowned. I held my breath watching. She was looking at those fake numbers. In her eyes, I saw suspicion forming. She looked at me, not as a free citizen, but as a patient needing control. Ms. Martinez. The judge looked straight at me. Do you have an explanation for these withdrawals? And why were you absent from the residence listed in the service of process? Sterling smiled triumphantly. Caroline stole a glance at me, eyes glinting with mockery. This moment was designed for me to explode. They were waiting for me to scream, cry, call them liars, acts that would only prove I was unstable. But I am a data analyst, And I don't react with emotion. I react with facts. I stood up, adjusting my jacket. Your Honor! My voice rang out, calm and cold like metal striking metal. Before answering regarding the money, I ask permission to verify a basic data point. Mr. Sterling just said I was absent from my residence? Correct, Sterling interrupted. The summons was sent to her parents' home in Pennsylvania 3 times, but she did not accept. That is the first anomaly, I said, signaling Mrs. Jenkins. My lawyer placed a single sheet of paper on the judge's bench. I have been a legal resident of Virginia for the past 14 years. I own a home, pay taxes, and am registered to vote in Arlington, Virginia. The plaintiff sending notices to a Pennsylvania address, where I haven't lived since I was 22, is an act of intentional procedural fraud to strip me of my defense. Judge Patterson paused. She picked up the residency confirmation, then glanced at Sterling. Her eyes had lost some sympathy. Regarding the psychiatric and financial allegations, I continued, not letting the rhythm break. I beg permission not to use empty words. My social security number is XXXXXXXXX. My current FICO credit score, updated this morning, is 820, top 1% of the US population. My total net worth, audited by an independent third party, is $1.2 million. I have never missed a bill payment in my life. I turned to look straight into my father's eyes. He started shifting in his seat, sweat beading on his forehead. Conversely, I raised my voice slightly, just enough for the room to hear clearly. If the court allows a comparison of the signatures on the withdrawal slips provided by the plaintiff with my sample signature on my driver's license and passport, the court will see a 90% difference in slant and pen pressure, a clumsy forgery. Objection! Sterling shouted, but his voice had lost its confidence. These are baseless accusations. I have a handwriting analysis from a court-recognized forensic expert, submitted with the counterclaim this morning, Mrs. Jenkins said, dropping another file down. And more importantly, Your Honor, we have GPS location data from my client's phone and car, proving that at the time the cash withdrawals took place at the bank in Pennsylvania, Miss Audrey was at her office in Virginia, 150 miles away. Unless she knows how to teleport, she could not have made those transactions. Silence enveloped the courtroom. It wasn't the silence of despair anymore. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut. Judge Patterson took off her glasses. She stared at Victor. My father shrank, his face shifting from fake sorrow to the ashen gray of fear. Caroline lowered her head, hands trembling, clutching her purse. Mr. Sterling. The judge's voice was colder than winter wind. Do you care to explain why your client filed for guardianship of a woman with financial capacity superior to his own, based on evidence with clear signs of forgery? Sterling stammered. Your Honor, I relied on information provided by the client. The petition for guardianship is denied immediately. The judge banged the gavel. The sound rang out like a gunshot executing my father's ambition. Furthermore, given the serious nature of the forged evidence and deception of the court, I am referring this entire file to the district attorney's office to investigate procedural fraud and document forgery. Court adjourned. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just stood there, packing my files with precise movements. As I passed the plaintiff's table, I stopped. My father looked up at me, eyes veined with red lines of hatred and helplessness. You think you won? He hissed through his teeth. You are nothing without me. I checked my watch. 9:45 a.m. You're wrong, Dad, I said, voice light as a feather. I'm just getting started. This was just civil court to keep my freedom. What comes next is actually for you. I walked out of the courtroom, leaving behind my family sinking into the quicksand they created. The 3 weeks following the trial didn't happen with screaming or heated arguments. Conversely, it was submerged in terrifying silence, the silence of a storm gathering energy before wiping out everything in its path. I didn't go back to Pennsylvania immediately. I stayed in Virginia, turning my apartment into a tactical command center, war room. My dining table disappeared under stacks of files, printed bank statements, and electronic devices. Marcus moved in to sleep on my living room sofa, not because we were close, but because the workload required 24/7 focus. We were no longer client and detective. We were architects, designing the collapse of a fake empire. Step 1. Visual data. Marcus connected the security camera hard drive he stole from my dad's house to the laptop. The screen lit up with grainy black and white footage. I sat there, holding a cup of cold black coffee, rewatching that fateful night through the lens of a cold camera. I saw Caroline tiptoe into my room at 9 p.m. I saw her pour the white powder packet into the cup, stir it with her red-painted pinky finger, then smile at herself in the mirror before bringing it to me. That smile. It wasn't the smile of a cold-blooded killer, but the smile of a spoiled child thinking she just pulled a clever trick to please daddy. But the footage at 2 a.m. was what froze my blood. In the video, Victor sat in his office, pouring a glass of scotch. He picked up the phone, calling someone. Marcus had synchronized the video timestamp with the call recording he secretly made. "Everything's smooth," Victor's voice rang, through the computer speakers, distorted but clear. "Audrey will sleep like a log until Friday morning. After getting guardianship, I'll sell her apartment in Virginia first. I need $400K immediately to plug the hole at the investment fund. If not, the loan sharks will break my legs." I rewound that part 3 times. So there was no protecting the family plan. It was all the panic of a desperate gambler looking for collateral. My dad borrowed money from the mob to invest in a ghost project, and I was the only liquid asset he had left. Step 2. Follow the money. This was my playground. Marcus might be good at picking locks, but I'm good at breaking financial mazes, with legal access, thanks to a court order allowing investigation into Victor for the countersuit. I churned through my dad's transaction history for the last 15 years. It was more pathetic than I imagined. Victor always prided himself on being a seasoned investor. But data doesn't lie. He was a miserable failure. In 2015, he lost $150,000 to a Ponzi scheme. In 2018, he burned my mom's retirement fund on junk crypto. And to cover those losses, he started hollowing out my identity. I created an Excel sheet listing every amount he stole. Forged student loan in 2009, $45,000. Credit cards opened secretly under my name, $60,000. Mortgaging grandma's house, $200,000. Total, $1.25 million cumulative damage, including interest and penalties. Every number entered into the spreadsheet was a knife cut severing the last tie between me and that man. I didn't feel heartbreak anymore. I only felt contempt. He wasn't a mighty monster. He was just a parasite grown fat on the host's blood. Step 3. Forensic evidence. The handwriting expert sent the results back on Thursday of the 3rd week. The 40-page report concluded with certainty. The signature on the new will Victor presented after Eleanor died is a forgery. Signatures on recent loan documents under Audrey Martinez share 99% pressure characteristics with Victor Martinez's sample. Marcus threw the file on the table, the paper hitting wood with a dry thud. "Done. We have enough evidence to put him away for minimum 20 years. Probate fraud, document forgery, identity theft, bank fraud. You want to call the FBI right now?" I looked at the wall covered in sticky notes, cash flow diagrams, and screenshots. The panoramic picture was complete. It was perfect, tight, and cruel. "Not yet," I said, eyes glued to an old family photo pinned in the center of the board, the only photo where Grandma was hugging me, while parents and Caroline stood apart. "Calling the police is the final step, but before the cuffs go on, I want something else." "What else do you want?" "You won." Marcus asked, puzzled. I want a confession. I turned, voice icy. I want to see the moment their masks drop when they realize I know everything. I want them to understand that it's not the law punishing them, it's me. The useless daughter took them down. I picked up my phone, drafting a text to the family group chat, which had been silent for 3 weeks. I'm coming home tomorrow night. We need to talk about dividing assets and Grandma's will. I think Dad is right, I shouldn't keep too much money. The message showed read immediately. Then the 3 dots bubbled continuously. They were confused. They were hopeful. They thought I had surrendered. That the court session was just a momentary weak resistance, and now I was back to being the obedient sheep. You're playing with your food, Audrey, Marcus warned, but there was amusement in his eyes. No, Marcus. I closed the laptop, the click sounding final. I'm preparing for the Last Supper. I packed all the evidence, USB with video, financial reports, signature analysis, and Grandma's original will into a black leather briefcase. Tomorrow, I return to Pennsylvania. Not to visit, but to execute the sentence. 7 p.m. Friday. The house in Pennsylvania was ablaze with lights. Through the dining room window, I saw my parents and Caroline sitting around the banquet table. There were candles, expensive red wine, and steaks on the plates. Victor's favorite meal whenever he felt he had won a big deal. They were celebrating my surrender. I walked into the house without knocking. My key still worked, and ironically, it was about to become the only key with any power in this place. The laughter in the dining room died instantly as my shadow stretched across the wooden floor. Caroline was the first to see me. She was raising a glass, smile frozen on her lips. Victor put down his knife and fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and leaned back in his chair with familiar superiority. Late, aren't you, Audrey? He said, tone condescending but unable to hide his smugness. Sit down. Mom saved some soup for you. I'm glad you thought through the asset division. Family comes first, right? I didn't sit. I walked straight to the head of the table opposite him, placing the black leather briefcase on the glass table. The dry thud cut through the fake atmosphere in the room. No soup needed, Dad, I said, voice so calm it was emotionless. I'm here to perform a final audit. Audit? Caroline scoffed, swirling her wine. Can you stop with the corporate tone? Nobody here cares about your boring spreadsheets. Just sign the papers, and we're done. I didn't answer her. I took the laptop out of the case, connecting it to the 65-inch smart TV on the wall via wireless HDMI. Everyone should look at the screen, I ordered. The TV flashed on. The security camera footage appeared. Sharp. Real. It was the scene of Caroline in the kitchen, pouring white powder into the tea. The high angle clearly recorded her shaking but determined hand. Next was the scene of Victor talking on the phone in his office at midnight. I need $400K. Audrey is collateral. The dining room plunged into a deadly silence. Caroline dropped her wine glass. The sound of glass shattering echoed like a warning shot. Red wine spread across the white tablecloth like a fresh bloodstain expanding. What is this? Victor's face went from red to ghostly white. He shot up, pointing at me. You dared to record inside my house? This is illegal. I'll sue you. Sit down, Victor, I said, not calling him Dad anymore. And correct your terminology. This is not your house. I threw the second file onto the table. The notarized copy of the 15-year-old will slid across the glass, stopping right in front of my mother. Grandma left this house to me, I declared, voice sharp and cold, cutting the air. You hid the will. You filed fraud with the probate court. You mortgaged property belonging to me to pay gambling debts. Under Pennsylvania law, that is grand larceny and mortgage fraud. Victor trembled, eyes darting around looking for an escape route. But there was no escape. The data had surrounded him. Caroline. I turned to the sister sitting paralyzed. In the video, you overdosed a sedative into my tea. That is assault and poisoning. With this criminal record, you will never get hired at any fashion company, and certainly, no rich man will want to marry a felon. Carolyn burst into tears, a howl of pure fear. Dad said it was just a mild sleeping pill. He said you needed rest. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Ignorance is not a defense in the eyes of the law, I replied coldly. Suddenly, another sound emerged. My mother. She was holding the will, thin hands shaking violently. She wasn't reading it. She was just stroking Grandma's handwriting. I knew, she whispered, tears falling onto the yellowed paper. The whole room turned to look at her. What did you say? Victor roared, trying to use intimidation to cover his fear. Mom looked up. For the first time in her life, she looked her husband in the eye. I said I knew. Mom showed me the will before she died. She said she left the house to Audrey because she was the only one with morals in this house. She turned to me, eyes full of late, cowardly apology. I was scared, Audrey. Your father threatened to kick me out on the street if I said a word. I secretly hid the copy in the cookie tin. I thought one day you would find it. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. The contempt inside me rose to its peak. She wasn't a victim. She was an accomplice. Her silence had enabled Victor's crimes for 15 years. She chose her own safety over justice for her daughter. You aren't a mother, I said, voice light but cruel as a verdict. You're just a hostage with Stockholm Syndrome. Just then, red and blue lights began flashing through the curtains. The siren wailed, tearing through the quiet night of the upscale neighborhood. Victor rushed to the window, looking out. 3 police cruisers were parked at the gate. You called the cops? He turned back, face twisted in horror. Audrey, I'm your father. You're going to put your own father in jail? I calmly closed the laptop, putting it in the case. I'm not putting you in jail, Victor, I said, adjusting my lapels. The data puts you in jail. I just hit enter. The front door was busted open. The SWAT team's shouts rang out. Police! Nobody move! I stood aside, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. I watched the police storm the dining room, handcuffing the man who used to be the terror of the family. I watched Caroline get dragged away, makeup smeared with tears. I watched my mother collapse in the chair, covering her face, sobbing. The scene was chaotic, noisy, and tragic. But to me, it was strangely beautiful. It was the beauty of order being restored. The buggy variables had been removed. The system had been purged. 6 months is the time required for a legal process to complete the dismantling of a life. 6 months of depositions, hearings, and mountains of evidence brought to light. In those 6 months, I watched my family, people who considered themselves untouchable upper class, crumble piece by piece under the weight of truth, recorded in black and white. Victor's sentencing day fell on a gray Tuesday morning. He stood in the dock, the expensive suit replaced by a state prison orange jumpsuit. His silver hair, once meticulously groomed, was now ragged. But the arrogance, a core feature of his faulty operating system, remained. My daughter fabricated everything, he screamed when allowed to speak his final words. She's jealous of her sister. She wants to destroy this family because she was never loved enough. Judge Patterson, who had seen through him since the guardianship hearing, just adjusted her glasses and looked down with unconcealed disgust. Mr. Martinez, she said, voice steely echoing through the courtroom. The evidence against you isn't emotion, it is mathematics. You stole $1.2 million. You forged signatures 45 times. You planned to strip your daughter of human rights systematically. The only jealousy here is your jealousy of the success you could not achieve yourself. The gavel banged. 12 years in federal prison, No possibility of early parole. Full restitution of financial damages to the victim. I watched him get led away in cuffs. He didn't look back at me. For the first time in my life, I didn't crave that look anymore. He wasn't Dad anymore. He was just a case closed. 2 weeks later, it was Caroline's turn. Her lawyer succeeded in arguing she was psychologically manipulated and acting under the direction of a dominant father. She escaped prison time, but the price wasn't cheap. 3 years probation, 500 hours community service, and a permanent criminal record for assault in the 3rd degree. She blocked me in the parking lot after court. The princess shell was completely gone. She looked 10 years older, eyes puffy and panicked. "Are you happy?" she asked, voice cracking. "You put Dad in jail. You destroyed my life. Who's going to take care of me now, Audrey? I don't know how to do anything. I've never had a job." I looked at the 32-year-old sister crying like a toddler. "That is exactly the problem, Caroline," I replied, opening my car door. "You never had to be responsible for your existence. You lived on Dad's approval and my money. Now the supply is cut. Welcome to the real world. My advice? Learn how to make coffee. Starbucks is hiring." I drove away, leaving her standing alone in the cold concrete lot. There was no reconciliation. Forgiveness was not in my investment portfolio right now. The punishment for my mother came slower, and in a crueler way. Poverty. To pay the $1.2 million restitution to me per court order, all of Victor's assets were liquidated. The house, cars, remaining investments, all seized and auctioned. My mother, named jointly on most debts, was left with nothing. 1 month after everything ended, she appeared at my apartment door in Virginia. She carried a small old suitcase, face haggard, crumpled with shame and desperation. "Audrey," she murmured, not daring to look up. "I have nowhere to go. They took the house. Can I stay in your living room for a while? Just until I find a job." I stood blocking the door. The smell of cheap perfume and fear radiating from her reminded me of the nights I cried silently in my room, waiting for her to come comfort me, but she never came. "No, Mom," I said. She looked up, stunned. "But I'm your mother. I gave you Grandma's letter. I helped you win." "You gave the letter because you were afraid of being abandoned by Victor when he went bankrupt, not because you wanted to protect me," I analyzed clearly. "You chose silence for 36 years. You saw me abused, used, looked down upon, and what did you do? You looked away to keep your own peace. You aren't a victim. You are a silent accomplice." "Audrey, please!" She started to cry, reaching for my hand. I stepped back, keeping a safe distance. "I transferred $5,000 to your account, enough to rent a small apartment and live for 2 months. After that, you're on your own. You're 64. It's time you learn to stand on your own feet without leaning on a man or draining your children." I closed the door. The lock clicked softly but decisively. It was the sound of setting the final boundary. I leaned back against the door, taking a deep breath. No tears, just the infinite relief of freedom. I didn't use the restitution money for luxury shopping. I used it to found the Eleanor Fund, named after Grandma. The fund specializes in providing legal support and financial education for women trapped in family financial control. The logo is a stylized key, symbolizing opening secret boxes and freeing oneself. I bought a small house by a lake, far from the noisy city. There, I grow chamomile flowers, the flower once used to poison me, now blooming under my own care. Every morning, I wake up, drink tea, check stock market data, and smile. I am Psalm, Audrey. I am no longer the forgotten daughter. I am the architect of my life, and in my world, there is no room left for toxic variables. Audrey's story is a cold reminder for anyone feeling invisible in their own family. Your value is not defined by how they treat you. Sometimes, cutting ties isn't cruelty, it's the most necessary act of self-rescue. If you are trapped, remember, don't wait for someone to save you. Find your own data, find your own box, and rewrite the script of your life yourself. Have you ever had to stand up against family to protect yourself? Or are you still waiting for an apology that will never come? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more stories about naked truth and justice served. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge is living a successful life without them.